All right. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Kim Kohn. I've been here at the Butte Archives for almost 8 years. I started in November of 2011. Prior to that, my background is actually in historic preservation. I have a bachelor's degree from Mary Washington College in Fredericksburg, Virginia, in historic preservation, which covers research and documentation, like National Register work, which is what I focused on, archaeology, museum work, which ties into a lot of what we do here as well, and good preservation practices as well. I spent many years, I guess I've had 20 years off and on, working in historic preservation. Took some time off to be a mom. Mostly what I did is National Register work. I've listed individual properties and historic districts in Tennessee, in Virginia, and in southeast Missouri. My biggest accomplishment, well, not my biggest accomplishment, my biggest goal after college was I wanted to list my hometown in the National Register of Historic Places because I felt that it was nationally significant. And for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which was one of the 3 Manhattan Project sites. And we like to think it was the most important one because that's where we figured out how to do it. How to separate uranium and plutonium for the bomb that was dropped that ended World War II. So that's where I grew up, and right out of college, my first job was in Tennessee for a contractor, or for a preservation contractor who got the contract to do the survey, historic survey, and National Register listing of Oak Ridge. So I got to do that. And Oak Ridge is the 2nd largest historic district in the United States. It's also the 2nd largest Superfund site in the United States.
What's number 1?
What? I was just going to guess. Who could tell me who number 1 in both of those categories are?
You.
You. So I like to tell people, because I grew up in Oak Ridge and now I live in Butte, not only do I glow in the dark, now I'm magnetic. I am actually probably more radioactive now after living for 20 years at 6,000 feet on a granite rock than my father was in 40 years of working in the nuclear safety industry. So, pretty sure, and I've had more x-rays too. So that's enough about me, and now you know who I am, how I got here. Well, I guess you don't know how I got here. But I got here because I wanted to live in Montana someday. And the reason I wanted to live in Montana is because my family history goes all the way back to Bannock in 1862.
Oh, wow.
So I'm proud to say my children are 6th generation Montanans. I am a 4th generation Butte girl, I guess, even though I wasn't born here. My grandmother was born here. Her parents immigrated, like a lot of people did, from County Cork, from Alahis, and from Iris. About 1895, they came to Butte and had a family, and then eventually moved up to, my grandparents moved up to Helena, and that's where my mom was raised. She met my dad. The rest of the story is now standing right here. All right, I'm going to talk to you about my favorite historic resource. I learned about these in college, and anybody who's done National Register work or historic survey work relies incredibly on the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. Our research sources here at the archives, that's work, are city directories, newspapers, census records. We have tax and land records, and my favorite are maps. We have topographic maps, which I love, road maps, which are just fascinating, and my favorite are these Sanborn maps. And that's what we are talking about today. Oops, there we go. So fire insurance maps. were created to help insurance companies assess the potential risks involved in underwriting policies. They depict features that affect the vulnerability of properties to disasters like fire, earthquake, and flood. The first fire insurance maps were created in London in the late 18th century. In America, D.A. Sanborn, a civil engineer and surveyor, began working on fire insurance maps in 1866. That year, the Aetna Insurance Company contracted him to prepare maps of areas in Tennessee. He also developed similar maps of Boston, later published as the Insurance Map of Boston, Volume 1, 1867. Seeing a lucrative market for this type of map, he established the D.A. Sanborn National Insurance Diagram Bureau in New York City to publish the Boston Atlas and develop and sell maps of additional areas. The rest is history, literally. So what is a Sanborn map? The Sanborn Company mapped 12,000 cities in the U.S. between 1867 and 1970. The insurance industry determined what kind of information was conveyed on the map. We had commercial properties. You can see the circle in blue. Industrial properties. And this is Butte, by the way, in case you didn't pick that up. In green, we've got a brewery down here. We've got railroad yards and lumber yards up here. And we've got the beginning of I think this is the Parrot smelter over here.
What year is that?
I think. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
I think it's 1891. I think that's the one I used. And it also shows residential properties. So we've got neighborhoods. In addition to the business district down here in Square, we've got growing neighborhoods that you can see. So,
Could you turn your lights off?
yeah, sorry.
Okay, much better.
Better? Good. Okay. So here we've got a block. This is Park and Main, where the Party Palace is down here. M&M going up the street, 1884, 1891, and 1916. So in the 1940s, the U.S. Census Bureau purchased 1,840 volumes to serve as base maps for statistical and sampling surveys. The 1940 census, by the way, is the most current census that is available that has been released. These maps later became the basis for the collection housed in the Library of Congress. The largest publicly accessible Sanborn collection in the country. It has recently been made available online, and there's the address. The Library of Congress collection covers 3,000 communities in 34 states, Canada, and Mexico. Now, here at the archives, we have black and white copies of Sanborns from 1884, 1888, 1890, 1891, and 1900. Not all of the years that we have contain all of the pages. So it's nice to be able to go to the Library of Congress site and I can download, and what you're seeing on here when I use the early ones are maps that I've downloaded from the Library of Congress because they are in color and they are complete. We have bound Sanborns, like this one that I brought out over here for 1900, 1907, 1914, 1916, 1927, 1942, and 1956. These are in color and were used by the water company. The Library of Congress has the following years in color for Butte: 1884, 1888, 1890, and 1891. So how do they work? Sanborns convey a complex amount of information very succinctly. One way they do this is through the use of color. A color key can convey information easily, freeing up the space for more details and creating uniformity throughout the maps. Not only uniformity for that city, but nationally, so that if you look at maps from Butte and then you compare them to maps of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, you can immediately read both of them equally easily because all of the symbols are the same. The maps also employ detailed codes and graphics that impart information in the form of lines, tick marks, and abbreviations. So you can see all the colors up at the top. And we're going to go through the parts of the Sanborn map. So first we have the title page, which on the Sanborn is very important. The earlier ones, the title page probably was part of the map as well. In 1884, we see a rudimentary page with a little bit of information. There's a small index map. I keep hitting the wrong button. There's a small index map up here in the top right corner. The map key and a label. So on the label, you have the name and the date of the town, what you're looking at. The population, in 1884, there were 10,000 people in Butte. Details about the fire department, because again, this is a fire insurance map. What kind of water facilities were there? Something else that's important, northwesterly prevailing winds. You gotta know that when you're fighting fires. And of course, the scale. Most maps throughout the country are at 1 inch equals 50 feet, which means objects are 600 times smaller than in real life. And that's a pretty standard scale. In 1888, the index map covers a larger area. We have a population of 22,000. There's fire and water descriptions. They're written out over here. They're not all crammed into that tiny little circle. And we've got a pretty big index here. So in 4 years, our population has doubled. And we've got a nice, pretty little title block there too. 1890, the city is obviously growing. In 1891, just 1 year later, it's growing fast enough in the late 1880s and 1890s that they sent surveyors out again. And we see more industrial growth. The population is 25,000. We see Meterville on the map, so it's large and significant enough to be included on the Sanborn. Okay. The next thing that we have, the body of the book, of course, is the map pages. Each block is numbered, and they're consistently numbered throughout the years. I mean, throughout 100 years of mapping, block 25 is always going to be block 25. And they try to be consistent with the page numbers as well. So if I'm looking at page 8 in 1891, chances are I'm going to find that same block on page 8 in 1927 as well. So that makes it easier. Consistency is wonderful. It's not always the case, but it's very helpful. You'll also notice that the north arrow is, whoops, see, there I go again. Like I said, I'm not used to being on this side of it. The north arrow is not always up. So you have to make sure, especially if you're looking at a town where you don't live, you might not know the streets, you've got to make sure how your pages are oriented there. And I'm going to digress a little bit here. We're going to look at block 25. There we go. This is block 25. The first, then this is, I think, in 1891. This is the first block of East Broadway at Main, and where the Herbor Tower is not yet built. It's going to be constructed in 1901. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the colors that are used. Here we have a 2-story frame structure, the Windsor Hotel, indicated by the color yellow. Yellow means that it's frame construction. What is frame construction? It's more flammable. Important to know in cases of fighting fires. We can tell from the Sanborn that it's the Windsor Hotel on the upper floors and that they are plastered. You can't read it there because it's really small, but it says plastered. The first story contains a restaurant, 2 saloons, and a barber shop. And the kitchen is in the rear. Here's an etching from about 1890, about the same time as the map, showing those buildings. And here's the Windsor Hotel. And look at that, it's a 2-story frame structure, just like it's indicated on the map. Here we have a 2-story brick structure. Brick is pink. And I couldn't find a picture of this, or an etching. So I went to one of our other resources, the city directories, and I looked, well, let me go back a little bit. I looked and it said down here, there's a barber and baths down here. I can't quite read what that is. Gentlemen's furnishings, I think that says clothing. Up and down the block, we've got a tailor here, we have a saloon here. So you can learn to do that. So of course I looked up barbers and gentlemen's clothings and found listings for a barber at 116 North Main, Gans and Klein at 118 North Main, offering men's clothing and furnishings, Charles Hydrunner, a printer at 118 North Main, probably upstairs from Gans and Klein, and at 122 North Main, J.A. Elliott, a photographer. So then we have blue. Blue is stone construction. So we have to look and see if that building is still there. That'd be pretty substantial. And that building, even though the Sanborn indicates a tailor and a saloon, an ad in the Anaconda Standard lists the tailor space for rent in 1891. For rent, cheap storeroom suitable for groceries, gents furnishings, or paints and wallpaper, situated on Main Street, Granite, Montana. Inquire of H.W. Shipman and Company, 122 North Main Street in Butte. So you can see how we tie all of our resources together, our newspapers, our city directories, and our Sanborn Maps. And of course, then I had to look up H.W. Shipman, and sure enough, the city directory for that year confirms that he is in fact at 122 North Main. And finally, our last color for this year anyway is green. Green on the 1891 map, and it's way over here, it's hard to see, indicates cement. Later on, cement will be shown as blue. And, and there we go. It will be shown as blue. These colors are universal throughout all Sanborn maps across the country, which is why I think people love them, because they really are beautiful, beautiful resources. So here is a more familiar view of the block. We have the Herbour Tower right here, and we have the Hennessy's department store, and they are orange. And with improving technology, orange is called fireproof construction. Here it tells us it's built in 1898, fireproof construction, steel frame, and brick walls. this says fireproof construction, and I can't read that because it's too tiny. But you can also see, the previous one, we had a lot of frame buildings through here, and now you see a lot of brick. Almost this whole block, with the exception of this little part right here, is brick construction. There was an ordinance passed after a series of fires in the 1870s and 1880s that required that commercial buildings be built of brick. Do you know what year that was, Mary? 1880 something.
I'm not sure.
Something.
You know, could you just, I just want to clarify, the yellow is, when you say frame, that means wood frame. It's
Wood frame.
wood-sided wood frame.
Yes,
And
thank you.
have brick,
Yeah, thank you.
wood-sided wood frame with brick in here.
Frame construction meaning wood frame, not steel frame or anything else. So yellow is wood, pink is brick, blue is concrete or cement, and orange is fireproof.
What's that little blue thing in the alley or whatever?
I don't know what that is. Open. It says open to the alley. You have to come and look at the 1916 Sanborn map. It's in our map room. So the next thing that we have, usually at the back of the book, but not always, are the specials. As you get later on, you have more and more specials. Specials might include industrial sites, even certain neighborhoods which are outside of the primary coverage area, or areas that require more detail. In our case, like mine yards, the Columbia Gardens. They're often, but not always, located on the back pages. And one thing you have to be sure of, a single page may contain multiple specials. So you've got 3 maps here that are not related to each other in space. And they might be in 3 different parts of the town. This is where they could fit them in. But they will tell you on the map page to go to whatever page this is, page 33, for a map of the Columbia Gardens. The Columbia Gardens Pleasure Resort. So this is an early map of the Columbia Gardens, and it will tell you on the edge of the index map to look at 33 for Columbia Gardens. It will also tell you this is the Butte Duluth Mineral Company. This is one of the mine yards, and it will also tell you, go to page 33 to find this one. A special might be an industrial site, might be a college, a factory, outlying buildings. They're always separated by the double border, and their north arrows may point in different directions. This one points this way, this one points this way. I might have cut off the north arrow for the top. I think it points up. So we have different north arrows for each special. And then things get complicated. We call them Pasteups. So this is the same map later, but you can see like little things here. This has been pasted over. This has been pasted over here. Those are corrections when they've come in afterwards and they've done a new survey and they've remapped some things, and they find that there are new buildings there, or there are buildings that are gone, but they don't want to issue a whole new map. Then they'll just paste in a little correction there, and you can use it there. Some of them you can even flake right off. Well, I mean, please don't. But you can see it's like decoupage. They just decoupage them. You can tell what I've been doing in my spare time. So what can we learn from Sanborns? Hopefully you've already learned a lot already. We can learn about suburban growth, the evolution of a property, and we can look at sites that no longer exist. So in 1890, this is the 1890 cover map, it's basically Butte. Here's the business district. We're growing a little bit up here, a little bit down here, Front Street is gonna run across this way. In 1891, 1 year later, we've got Meterville popping up. Little more growth up here, little more coverage anyway, requiring more coverage, some more coverage over here. And then in 1916, we've got this huge area down here that we call the flat. Now, this is the index map, so each of these colors has a number on it. That tells you what page to go to look for that block. You can see here that none of this area is mapped in 1916. You can look a little bit down here, that might be the industrial school. I'm not sure, I'll have to look at the index, but you can see a tremendous amount of growth and development in Butte up to World War I. And by 1956, we required 2 books. The map pages got smaller, but we needed 2 books to cover it. So book 1 is mainly uptown, indicated by the orange boundary here. And book 2 is everything outside of uptown. So it's going to be Walkerville, maybe a little bit of Centerville, Meterville, McQueen, East Butte, and a good portion of the flat. And that's the most recent one that we have.
Do you know how far west that goes on the flat?
It goes probably about Continental Drive. So,
On the west.
oh, west, sorry.
Other way.
It's one of those things when you cross the Mississippi River, your east and west gets mixed up. I've 20 years I've gotten messed up. About where the cemeteries, I think this is Williamsburg right here.
Okay, so Montana Street, basically.
Oh, absolutely. Montana Street will be like up here.
Okay.
And you'll find places like Burlington and the Orphan Grove and things like that as specials. So you would look those up as specials. So we are going to look at the evolution of the property. We're going to look at block 11. Changes over time are evident on the maps, whether looking at individual structures, city blocks, or industrial sites. Changes include additions to the building, new construction materials, as well as a change in the use of the building. So right here, this block is going to change considerably. This is the Miners Union Building, 1884. This is Court Street, and we are sitting right about here, right now. So you can see there wasn't a whole lot there, but look, this is interesting. There are, on the larger map in 1884, a lot of these little creeks. One that some of y'all might be familiar with or remember is Missoula Gulch. When you dip down near, I'm trying to think of what the downhill street is, Jim? Clark Street, thank you. Down near Clark Street is about where Missoula Gulch goes down there. But there were a lot of little drainages like that throughout Butte that we would have no idea looking at today. So here we have that same block in 1888. We've got some substantial commercial buildings going on here, a saloon and billiards here, probably on the first floor, post office, and of course upstairs is the Miners Union Hall. Still a mix of frame buildings, a lot of little frame. Most of these are going to be dwellings. Up here, this is Copper Street. You can see up here it says not improved. So it's a dirt road, basically. The alley here is not improved, so it hasn't been paved. 1890, a little more substance, especially down here. 1891, starting to tighten up a little bit. We've got, I think that's furnished rooms right now. By 1916, look how substantial this block is. It's got the fire department that was built in 1900, which is where we're sitting now. Well, actually, we're sitting over here now. And the Miners Union Hall is gone. Here's the Murray Hospital. 1942, these buildings are gone. Empty lot there, empty lot here. Look, all of these houses are gone here. Here's a little annex to the Murray Hospital. 1956. Most of this has disappeared. Here's the fire department. This is vacant. Parking, that's all parking. And of course now we know that this is our parking lot. You can see this little blue line here. There's the wall. And if y'all haven't gone up to our parking lot, we actually have interpretive signs up there talking about our labor history. So take a look up there. This is not the house that's sitting up there now. That house was moved in there. But this is our parking lot. This is our parking lot. And this is our two-story vault and auditorium right here. Here's the fire department. And this is all parking. Now I gotta catch up. So, here's the northwest corner of Park and Main in 1891 and 1916. 1891, we have a population of 25,000, mostly male. So you see a lot of saloons, restaurants, gambling, and this is true throughout most of Uptown Butte. A lot of saloons, a lot of theaters, a lot of female boarding houses. Where do you think those are? All those female boarding houses are on East Mercury. 1916, we now have a population of about 82,000. And this is calculated by the Polk City Directory. We have the civilizing influence of women, not the ones in the boarding houses. They offered their own civilizing influence in the form of more commercial ventures available to women in our commercial district. But we also see, in addition to saloons, we see more stores and businesses coming in that are that are for women. We have a social hall and a bank. So, talking about places that no longer exist. We're going to do a little time series here on the Anaconda Road. So, this is the Anaconda Road. Going up, here's Copper Street, and North Wyoming Street, and Woolman. And this is in 1916. You can see all of these little wooden houses that are there. Oh, okay.
You probably leave it there.
Then in 1942, you can see where a lot of those little houses, let me go back again. A lot of those houses are starting to disappear because they're starting to talk about, I think it's Butte, is it Butte Forward? Is that the one? With the
Greater Butte Project.
Greater Butte, I'm sorry, I get the two confused. The Greater Butte Project with the Kelly Mine coming in. And here we go. We've got the Kelly Mine coming in, and we have a lot of houses that are missing on the Anaconda Road by 1956. So, in conclusion, I hope you've learned a little bit about Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. They can be invaluable resources when looking at roads, properties, buildings, sites, cities. They work as a very visual database of very concise information. They are universal. Most cities and towns will have a set located in the planning department, the library, or the historical society. And they're just plain fun to look at. So we have them out and available in our map room, which is adjacent. It's that back room adjacent to our reading room. And I encourage y'all just to come and look at them. And I've got one open up over here. Come and find your house. And that's all she wrote. Any questions?
Very good.